March the 17th, the night of the public hearing, there's a possibility that I won't be here. Tosh has his election that day, and it's late in the day. Well, we don't exactly know what time it is. It's not going to be first thing in the morning. So just depending on how he does and what that is, I may or may not. Maybe I should have waited till after this. Maybe.
Yeah, it was. It was your.
You got it.
It was like.
Yeah, it's enough for you that can. I know. He's likely to be seen. Yeah.
Tell your budget and briefs are in your mailbox. Pamphlets that you left. I know I showed you. You did.
We also
It's not packed today, I see. People have other things to do with their Saturday.
Yeah.
I can't believe
Nice
it.
weather.
Oh, incredible.
Really nice.
Don't say it.
You know, I spent the last week. Oh, that's a strike. Okay. I don't know.
I just told her.
He was with the Expos, and he had an insolvency. He brought it down to DC and didn't have space for it. And I remember I was trying to, I worked for the international for 5 years, and I'm not in space, and I have nothing that takes on place. You know, just pick something, and I'm like, all this stuff that I don't know that you put in your office and you can use it. And I still got one, and it's not a photograph. It's a painting.
Yeah.
It's a painting. I wasn't even close. It's a painting. Wow. I mean, and I love the colors and when it stands because every time I look at it, it's like patience, she gives me this for like strength, worried about space. It has a lot of meaning to me. I love it. It's my favorite.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't help but look at it. It's
Yeah.
really-
And sometimes I like to appreciate people but
It's perfect for your office.
it's perfect. It's good for the office, and it's in a good spot because everybody can appreciate it.
Right. I can't believe it's.
Yes, it is.
And how lucky that you have it.
Yes, and when I left, I wasn't sure because he had left. And
Oh, absolutely. Dig in.
all the ones I had, that was the one that I wanted. And I said, hey, John, you never took those payments. Are you seeing payments? I bought them, so that's yours. So,
I saw someone.
Very highly of them.
oh, interesting show.
I haven't seen her in months now. She's so great. I love working with her. She's doing great stuff too. Oh my gosh, yes. I always feel like we had a great working relationship.
And I'm gonna stop by.
Yeah, she's,
No.
No.
and she's, yeah, I love the way she looks at things. So
That's so
much
nice.
as she
That's so nice.
Come through the city. Yeah, that's fun. That's good. Saturday.
Eric, how are you?
So it was one.
Paul's behind me.
I
John says
do that every day.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah.
No, they actually both called me at the exam as I was driving. Okay. It's kind of strange.
I don't even know.
They had to one unfold me.
Did you get the budget memo, the life insurance with the new paragraph?
I think that went to Charlie.
Because I asked Bill to send it to you too.
We have a final version assigned.
Okay, good. We're looking good, right?
Yeah. I think so.
Excellent.
Will she be here on Tuesday? She will be here for Monday's public hearing and Tuesday's council meeting. She should be back tonight or in the morning.
Other than Michelle.
I'll go run one. I think they're on too.
Here's some extra ones.
Okay.
I emailed her.
It's all right.
Oh, now you're gonna email us? Oh, great. It's just a long meeting. It's crazy. Yeah, I heard it. Fixing the
One of the things is the email that she reported, he says he's not really worried about this.
Yeah, he just likes
He's just bad. No.
Is this supposed to?
Two different things.
Well, except that
He's happy to just put what we wrote or something.
Yeah.
That's not, it doesn't bother me. Well, it says you will no longer have any That's actually.
I'm a citizen.
That's playing a little fast. That's playing a little faster.
Yeah.
Taking care of that in just American.
Yeah, can we get text? They have a Twitter account? Wow. You see this? That's what we got the email about this morning. No. You know whose son that is that we got the email from this morning? That's Scalia's son. Justice. Our daughters used to, or my son and his daughter used to go to preschool together.
That's cool.
Now she got it, now she's gonna email it.
I did. I was hand delivered to me as I was walking through the discussion this morning. I am.
I'm in a court. Our kids would. I've emailed with them.
Well, yes, it's employee time.
What's that?
They got it wrong. He's a lid.
Oh yeah, I got it. Yeah. Hypothermia on. Hypothermia on. Okay, I'm good. That's right, I'm good. What? Oh. Yeah, we're gonna put it back in the front setting. I'm blaming the budget director, man. Of course. Yeah. No, you should not. No, you should not.
Just wave and say thank you.
Probably not a good idea. We got an email on this one.
Okay, good morning, and thanks everyone for adjusting your schedules to accommodate the last Monday night's work session. I think if we rescheduled it to Mother Nature, but it is here, and we'll go ahead and get started, and hopefully still finish up the 2-hour time period from the audit. So with that, Mr. Sigmund.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Good morning. This is the first of a series of work sessions to talk about the fiscal year 15 proposed budget. Today we're going to talk about general fund revenues, the 5-year compensation model and framework, and compensation, employee compensation. I just want to take a quick moment and introduce the folks at the table. You probably know everyone, but just in case you don't, we have to my left Morgan Ralph, who is with OMB, our budget director Nelsie Smith, our CFO Laura Trigg, our assessor Brian Page, and then from OMB as well Eric Eisinger. They'll take different roles and parts in this presentation, but let's go ahead and get started. As you recall, you gave us guidance that set the framework for the fiscal year 15 budget, and in so doing, you told us that we should maintain the existing real estate tax rate and personal property tax rate, as well as dedications and reservations, but that the manager could propose changes to tax policies, rates, designations, fees, fines, and service charges that were equitable, fair, and feasible, and certainly in line with state law, and we did that. You've seen this slide before, and this is really just laying out where the revenue comes from in the general fund. Of course, the general fund budget is $634.8 million. The majority of that revenue coming from property tax, both commercial and residential, and then assortment of other taxes and revenue sources. Just also by way of background and context, you've seen this layout, which is really what those numbers are from the various revenue categories and how they compare to what we projected in fiscal year 14, the dollar amount difference and the percentage change. And so we talked about that in the budget presentation, so I won't spend a lot of time there. Just laying out some background before we dig into these numbers a little bit further. The average tax bill impact, of course, my recommendation.
Yeah, sorry, real quick. Can you step back for a second? Can you elaborate a bit, just so I think we're all aware of what you're doing with fund balance and kind of what that relates to 14?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of years ago, shortly after I got here, we talked to council and said we would sort of by administrative policy look to designate 1% of fund balance as revenue in our budget projections. So you can see both for the 14 approved and 14 projected that use of fund balance is 6.19 million, which is 1% of what the roughly total revenue budget is. There's a significant reduction in the proposed use of fund balance for 15, and that number goes down to 2.39. And that is because our revenue performance in this fiscal year 14, is below our projections. And so we anticipate, because we have poor performing revenue sources, particularly in our consumption-based taxes, that we are actually going to spend a portion of that fund balance in this year. And so it will not be available to carry over for next year. And that's why you see the reduction in 15 from 6.19 million to 2.39 million. It is accounting for our belief that based upon current year performance, if we're actually going to have to spend a portion of that fund balance. As you know, when we designate fund balance as a revenue source, we anticipate not spending that and carrying it forward to the next year. And so this really does speak to sort of the sensitivity of the revenue model and our concern about how revenues are performing right now and what that also means for us in the future. So we made adjustments in those revenue categories where we're performing poorly for fiscal year 15 and recognizing that we'll have less to carry over for 15 as well.
And again, it's just it's a whole to help balance the budget, prepare a balanced budget. And what you're saying is that you hope that we don't have to use it, but so that was the case in 2014, but not in 2015. You're acknowledging.
Well, we're acknowledging that we are going to use it this year,
right.
And so we'll have $4 million we can't carry forward is what we're assuming for 15, because we have poor performance in our many revenue categories in this year.
Yeah, so
What percentage of that what percentage is that?
What is that? It's about 0.5%, 0.4%.
A third of 1%. Yeah.
And again, the drivers for the non-performers is things that we've been reflecting on all year long. Sales taxes and
Transit, lodging.
But that's not uncommon just to us. I mean, the region is being affected by those same drivers and outcomes. And so, again, it's the economy, the sequestration certainly did not help, and then all the weather impacts that we've had certainly did not help. As a matter of fact, it's further exacerbated it because I'm sure we already overspent our budget for snow removal.
And we do set aside fund balance for that, but again,
Right.
if we're gonna use fund balance for weather, then we don't have it to provide for tea or something else.
Right.
And we're gonna get what revenue re-estimates at a certain point too, though. We're gonna look at another look at this before the budget's final.
We've done the major revenue re-estimate that typically causes changes to the revenue model. And that was we did that in January, and it did bump up our estimate for property tax. However, because we're performing so poorly in sales, transient, and restaurant, the reduction in fund balance offset the growth very little growth, but the growth that we had in property tax.
So
we don't anticipate a major a revenue estimate that causes a major change to the model at this point.
Because we're still assuming we're gonna have $2.2 million of fund balance. We may not even have that. Any additional growth for 14 would need to potentially reduce the use of fund balance, the remaining use of fund balance.
The use of fund balances, they'll look at it in terms of our overall profile. I don't know that this is particularly negative to us from a rating agency standpoint, because what it says is we're managing our resources appropriately. They understand that there are fluctuations and changes. I think, frankly, what they'll appreciate is that we've built into our revenue assumptions and models ways to address this issue. So I don't think it'll be a negative at all. It'll be either neutral or positive that we manage conservatively. We plan for these kinds of fluctuations and handle it, frankly, the way we're supposed to.
Do you see that maybe soon we'll be able to go back to what we had last year?
Our goal would be to get back to a 1%, and that will cause. In order to do that, that causes us to make choices and decisions on the expenditure side to get there if those revenue numbers don't rebound quickly, and we don't anticipate that we'll have a wholesale change in fiscal year 16. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the 5-year forecast model.
I have one question. Not exactly directly related to this, but since the General Assembly has not come forward with a budget for us, they may not until the end of this month or later, we don't know.
we're just going ahead and planning on assumptions that what we think is coming our way is coming.
We're planning on assumptions. The big fight, as you know, is over the Medicaid expansion. So we'll be monitoring that the best. We have to plan for what we have right now. I don't think that changes our circumstance on our state revenue numbers. If any, what I think would occur if the shutdown were to take place is that we would be delayed in receiving revenue potentially from the state, not that it would materially change for the revenue that we budget, because that's not the fight. The fight's over the expansion, not over the traditional sources that we plug in here.
It's never over though.
It's never over till it's over.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I just wanted you to kind of go into that a little further is I think speaks to the variation that we saw in 14, even during the year, I mean, as we ended the year, so.
The other thing I would say too, just to make the final point on that, our use of fund balance has varied over the years. Our sort of spread has been between 0.5% of revenues to about 1.5% of revenues. We settled on 1, so it isn't necessarily unusual that it's been reduced. I would prefer us to be at 1. I feel more comfortable at 1%. But we have seen this fluctuation before and budgeted fund balance in a range before. But this does speak to what the overall trends are and sort of the low growth in some of these categories.
And I think it's a really important point. You highlighted it when you introduced the budget. I think it should be part of your public presentation. And you know, I think it's in some ways a wake-up call even for some of the departments.
I would say, yeah. Our ability to sort of fix things
Absolutely.
Is not
Heads
there.
are hearing that.
They've heard that message and they know that we're our ability to do that is not there, and our expectation is that we manage budgets within resources, and frankly, we may have to come back depending on how this trend carries out for the rest of the year and reduce expenses to make the numbers to meet our budget obligation in this current fiscal year.
Because I think some of the things with transit lodging and others were really at the end of last year. We really haven't accounted for the early part of 14 yet.
Right.
So
right.
It could be
news could be worse. That's
yeah.
what the CFO tells me on a regular basis.
Right.
You've seen the tax bill impact before. We have not made recommendations to change or to increase the tax rate, although taxpayers will see increase based upon appreciation. From the residential perspective, the residential real estate bill would increase by roughly 3.8% or $190, and you can see the breakout for single family versus condo. The commercial growth is pretty flat. It's growing at about, well not about, it's growing at 0.68%. And of course that tax bill will vary because there's such a wide disparity in valuation on commercial property such that an average really isn't a useful metric for us to report. So let's talk a little bit more about revenues by property type, and with that I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Page to walk through this next section.
Mayor, members of council, the next 2 slides summarize several of the highlights from the real estate presentation that was previously given on February the 11th. The bar chart on the left bifurcates the assessment change by new growth and appreciation. Of particular interest there is the multifamily, and the table on the right it illustrates sources of revenue by property type. All total real estate revenue estimates are $369.1 million. The next graph is particularly telling because it illustrates the widening gap between commercial and residential base when multifamily is included with residential assessments. So you have roughly 75, 25, 25 being commercial, and commercial. And of particular interest here is we see a lot of cranes and whatnot in new construction in the city, but most of it is all multifamily residential. Obviously has a demand on public services. And right now the department is tracking as many as 8,338 multifamily units that can be delivered over the next 3 to 5 years in 25 projects located citywide.
And Mayor, members of council, this slide shows Potomac Yard. As you know, you've made a commitment for Potomac Yard, and you know it will provide long-range benefits. and we know that, we need to implement that commitment, we're gonna have to set aside resources. So we think it's important that we review that commitment as part of our budget deliberations, so we know the appropriate context of looking at our assessments, that the total assessments will be a particular number, and we have to look at what portion of that is Potomac Yard.
Can we talk about this for a second? So, when we had talked last year about when the council adopted the original funding plan for the Metro, they had gone property type by property type and said this portion of the future tax revenues from the commercial development is set aside for Metro, this portion of residential is set aside. I think we had a conversation a year ago about the need going forward to look at refining that now that we have some kind of estimates on what the service requirements are for all these property types in the yard. What's the thinking on that? What's the timetable on that? I mean, do we think those percentages will change?
Well, right now, as Brian pointed out, right now, we're mostly seeing the multifamily housing portion of that growing. So at any point, now that you've got most of the plan in place, you could look at it and say, which property types do you think are.
It's looking eager back there, sorry.
Oh, I'll say more, go ahead.
It's on the planning zone work program for the spring, basically, to restart the study. City of Rockville just did the study and looked at multifamily, and that's what we didn't have in the PTO study was just residential.
Yeah.
As opposed to the multifamily we're getting are basically one bedrooms with some twos, but mostly ones, and very few children. And that's the biggest influencer on what percentage to set aside for services. And so when we basically go through and restudy the service and how much to set aside out of the yard of the taxes received, it will be we'll be looking at gradations of different kinds of residential, and I would suspect that the percentages will for multifamily will in a sense won't be as need to set aside as much for services.
So potentially we're looking at a greater percentage of that multifamily development being able to divert that money now for the Metro in the short term, and then some of we talked about how the pace of the residential development is probably, I don't know, if we would characterize it as ahead of where we thought it would be at this point. I'm pretty convinced that between when I went to bed last night and when I got up this morning, there were like 3 new buildings that got constructed in the yard.
Do that in the dark.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So potentially these change the numbers, maybe not dramatically, but in a very different way. Okay, well that's good to hear, because I think because that obviously, we have the MBTA dollars, and then potentially a big greater share of some of the development money. We're really changing the funding stream in a good way, in a way that makes it easier for us. So.
And even with the existing portion set aside, we can see the CIP change some of the funding to reflect the MBTA.
Okay, great.
How many, it's 8,000 plus and 25 projects in how many years you expect that?
Yeah, potentially 3 to 5, but if you remember during the.
But that's citywide.
Citywide, correct. In Potomac Yard, if you want to look at specific areas, there's 1183 within 5 projects.
You guys had a great chart in the assessment report showing the kind of the new development year by year, and then the number of units. I mean, that number of units list was that's kind of amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what, anywhere from groundbreaking to about to be delivered. 8,000 units and we're delivering. That's a lot.
All right. So there's a number of, I'd say a relatively limited number, but a number of revenue changes that we are recommending to the general fund budget. We have them listed here. We're prepared to talk about any of these that you'd like to talk about. We voted the ones that probably are have the greatest interest in. One is to extend parking meter hours Saturday at Carlisle and then to 9 p.m. citywide. We talked about 9 p.m. citywide last year as a potential recommendation. We did not move forward with that. With the advent of mobile parking technology, We think that it's a bit easier on consumers and customers that this change will facilitate, so we're comfortable with making that recommendation again. We have a number of others there that you can see listed. The other piece is the registration fees for out-of-state vehicles. That would be a $100 annual fee. We think that can not only improve our enforcement of the parking registration requirement, but also generate some revenue there, and probably the
Before you go to the really controversial.
Yeah. You want to talk about that one?
Can we talk about the out-of-state vehicles? I still don't quite understand that. I haven't researched it since we talked, but if someone can explain it to me. So, because I thought we already have, if you're garaged here for over whatever the number is, what is it, 2 months or a month, you have to register.
Yeah, you have to register. This is really more of an enforcement mechanism because you're required to register, but it's one of the most difficult things to enforce.
Sure.
And so the parking enforcement goes down and gives tickets, but the idea is that it helps with putting a decal on a car that's out of state so that we know that we don't have to have an enforcement issue. It's really supposed to drive registration.
This is a fine?
It's the state considers it a tax. We call it a fee, and so it's a.
So right now, if I have an out-of-state place, and I have my vacation home here in Old Town, and I'm there, 3 months a year. I have to register with the city, and I get a personal property tax decal that I throw on my car, and that's legitimate. I have I'm out-of-state place, but I have personal property tax decal. What is changing for me? Anything?
If you are here less than 6 months, you have to put the decal on your vehicle as well.
But I already do.
I thought you said more than 6 months.
No, I'm saying less than, yeah, so, sorry, less than 6 months. Oh, did I? Sorry. Okay, so if I'm here less than 6 months, and I'm already putting a decal on.
There's no change. If you're already putting a decal. Yeah, it's for someone who has out-of-state plates and does not put a decal, doesn't have a decal on their vehicle. And again, officially, we're really trying to get the revenue that the city should have from the parking.
Okay, so the law is not really changing, it's more of how we go after.
What the state is doing is allowing us to require the decal on all the vehicles. Because we get lots of calls from people saying, there's a car in my neighborhood, it doesn't have a decal on it, what's the deal? 90% of those are legitimate military or something else, but that neighbor doesn't know that, and so they feel like somebody's not paying their fair share. This allows us to, in a more demonstrative way, put a decal or something else on every vehicle that's out of state.
So this means all those military vehicles now have to come in?
They won't have to pay, because they are legitimately exempt.
Okay. Well, we'll want them to have a sticker.
So they will have to get a sticker?
They won't pay though.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's trying to drive the personal property tax revenue more so than the out-of-state vehicle fee.
And Laura, what does the Saturday at Carlisle get us? I'm just sort of curious. Or is it more policy of consistency throughout the city?
Are you talking about for the parking?
Yeah, the parking. Yeah. I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just sort of curious.
Saturday Carlisle was basically for consistency, and also when we talk to the retailers on King Street, one of the things that they're doing now is they're saying park over Carlisle and walk over.
Walk over.
And there's not really an understanding why there's paid for parking on King Street, especially at the other end, and not in Carlisle. It's also, as you mentioned, consistency with our parking plan for Old Town.
Yeah. Well, and with that aspect, just a little footnote here. I mean, that is, as Old Town said in its newsletter, and I know this, it's been the elephant in the room, and we really do have to address the residential side of things and come to some resolution
on that. Yes.
This in terms of districts and everything. I mean,
right. The most significant revenue recommendation is the modification of the early tax rent relief affordable housing. Early tax relief program and the expansion of the rent relief affordable housing program. Before we talk about this one, we are working on a budget memo. We'll have it to you next week. There is a slight structural change that we're going to make in this recommendation so that we can make sure we align what we're proposing with state law about the asset valuation and how we do that. So my suggestion to you all is to let us get you that budget memo next week. We have a work session of the accountable, effective, and well-managed government on April the 2nd, which is where we talked about and this recommendation emanates from, and we can talk in depth about this program at that work session, because you'll have the benefit of the budget memo that explains what modification to this we would be making. If you wanna talk about it today, we certainly are prepared to do that, but I think you'll be better informed as well as the citizens who are interested in this when we complete and get you that budget memo next week. And we can talk about this at our subsequent work session.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I do have one question.
Sure.
I'm generally fine with the overall recommendation of looking at the program, but my concern is the shift from, tax-paying residents to the, rental side of things. And one of the questions I asked the city manager, Nelsie, was how many individuals, can we account for the fact, is there some sort of basic requirement that they have lived in the city for a specific number of years? How many of these people are actual, residents, or are they just new residents? I mean, I think we have to make, or have a better understanding and have some sort of distinction there of what this really means to us. Because I from a policy perspective, if we're going to continue to do this, and I want to make sure it's, I don't know quite how to phrase it, but I mean, we have to make sure, people just aren't moving into the city to get, a rebate on their taxes or something. I just
So the budget memo does break out in terms of categories.
Is this the one down the street?
No, you didn't get it. You haven't got
Length of
You didn't read it?
This wasn't one of the ones you got last night.
Yeah, okay, I knew we got one last night.
The budget memo that we're working on does break out categories of the rent relief side, how long participants have been in the city. So you'll be able to see that when we give that to you. So we'll give you ranges 1 to 6 years, greater than 6 years, how many people in the rent relief program as it exists today have been in Alexandria. So we'll cover that.
And while I know it's a hard thing, with asset evaluation and all this stuff, but I mean, I think we just have to carefully look at that mix, because the people that we say we want to help are ones that potentially could be hurt with that shift to to the rental side of things. And so I mean, I just want to make sure we're understanding the full complexity of this issue.
Our goal was to try to be overall. It really was about trying to be fair in how we administer this program, and the lion's share of what we are counting as revenue for this really is about the shift in the program for elderly tax relief, and isn't about a subsidy for rental relief.
Well, see, that's the thing, and I think, and that's why I want those numbers, because already there's an impression in the community that that's in effect what this is. This is sort of the thinly veiled sort of attempt to have rent relief and yet another affordable housing program.
So we spend 3.3 million on rent relief, or I'm sorry, on elderly tax relief today, 3.3 million. If we were to make these modifications, we'd still spend 2 million in elderly real estate tax relief. We're only talking about a portion, $300,000 for the rent relief program. So the lion's share of what we're counting as revenue is to the program modification, and is not going to subsidize rent relief in terms of proportion.
So this is the net. The 1.3 is the net.
The net.
The net impact in general.
Yes. So if we were to not do the expansion, then it'd be, I guess it'd be another 240,000. We would count as revenue. So
yeah, but still,
so we're saying
in constrained budgets.
No, I understand that.
$500,000, $1 million is a lot of money.
I'm just saying to the point of this change, the dollar amount of the change is really not going to, the lion's share of that is not going to expand rent relief program, is all I'm saying. But I understand that.
Yeah, and some of these questions and my comments are not a surprise,
Right,
I've talked about it. So,
yeah.
I mean, I just want to make sure we're all very clear in what the shift potentially could mean, and
yes.
Right now, about a third of the rent relief participants have been here longer than 6 years, so 2/3 of them.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think we need to have just have a general understanding of that.
I think the other thing that would be helpful, it's already in the budget, somewhere spelled out, but again, we're not the only jurisdiction that has such a program.
We laid out in the budget.
Right, and we have to all be in the budget. Yeah.
We do the comparison of what the thresholds are for other jurisdictions in Virginia. So you'll get that budget memo next week, and you'll be then primed, and will be ready to talk to you about this on April the 2nd, when we have the affordable, accountable government, work session.
So, you're saying that those that are eligible at this time are people who have been in the system or lived here for 6 years. But how do you ensure that in the future?
Well, I think that's what Paul is asking, could we restrict it? Now, there's no restriction, we just gave the statistics of who have, we know how long they've been in the program. There's no current restriction on how many years to be in the program.
And so, well.
It's just a statistic of what is, not that what we require.
Okay, we got that, and the question is, do we have the legal right to limit the program only to those who have been in the system, say 5 years?
You can make it whatever
in the
you want.
future?
You can make it whatever you want. Yes. Let's move to the 5-year forecast model, and Nelson's gonna talk a little bit about this.
Sure. We're shifting gears a little bit here, and we wanted the opportunity to come back to you all because we had an early conversation about the multi-year forecasting, multi-year budgeting, and we eventually ended up with a 5-year financial plan that we promised you all we would come back to. So this is really revisiting what we had talked about last fall. We have a few slides here of just introducing what we're talking about. And then I'm going to turn it over to Eric to actually walk you through some scenarios. And so, first off, I want to talk by saying we currently do a financial forecast. We've had it in the budget historically for a long time. And we're continuing to build off of that because it's actually based on some trends that we have. But what we want to come back to you with at the end is a 5-year financial plan that actually takes the conversations that we have over this budget cycle, puts that into the model. The model will tell us what our numbers look like over the 5-year plan. And then we're going to come back with some policy level questions that some growth in certain categories that we think we need to actually talk about. And understand where you all are with, let's say, stormwater. We have a huge need there, so that could be something that we come back with and ask you for your policy direction on how we handle that. So the first slide here is really just talking about what a financial forecasting and multi-year forecasting is and why we do it. And really it is so that we're not caught off guard when we have a financial problem, whether revenues, we have another economic downturn, or we actually have some revenue growth in a 5-year horizon, and we need to make sure that our operating expenditures closely align with the revenue that we're expecting over the next 5 years, and we can plan accordingly. It's also an opportunity for us to really look at the capital decisions that we make and how it impacts our operating budget. One of the things since I got here, and I know Rashad and Laura are pretty passionate about this as well, is we need to make sure that the capital budget isn't a conversation that we have on the side. It's actually talked about and brought in to the conversation on the operating side, because really that's where we pay for it. And so this will be that place where these two are married together, so you can see all of those impacts in one place over the next 5 years. Moving to the next slide, just to tell you a little bit about our old forecasting model, which is still, there's still remnants of this in our current budget that we've just proposed. GFOA, which is the Governmental Finance Officers Association, who gives us those fabulous awards, the Budget Award or the CAPR Award, they really like this sort of modeling, forecasting. We get high marks for this annually when we present their budget. But we want to make sure that what we do currently is very static. There's not a lot of dynamic expenditure changes. It's really looking at trend analysis from our history and just projecting them out. And so the new model, and if you had a chance to look at this portion of the budget, we talk a little bit about what the new model will provide us. And so with that, you'll see it adds we have layering capabilities. So if you say to us, and one of the reasons we wanted to bring this up at the very first work session with you all, is we want you to come to us if you have ideas or questions and say, hey, can you put this in the model and tell us what that would do? If we added 300 new employees to the city, what does that look like over 5 years? I just threw that one out there. If we built a new fire station, which we actually have in the capital plan, what is that cost impact on the operating side of that? So you can throw out to us ideas that you, thoughts that you have, and we can run it through the model and give you, well, where does that fall out? And then at the end, when Eric's finished, we'll come back and talk a little bit about the expectations going forward, and how we're going to actually give you a nice plan to work from in terms of ensuring our sustainability, because really this is part of all of our goals, I think, is to have a fiscally sustainable budget, and we're working towards that with this new financial.
So are we going to be able to do, during the process, that kind of, we want to restore this, or we want to cut this or add this, and be able to see that impact that it's going to have in future years? I mean, I think that's what I've always wanted.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Some things will have a very nominal impact over the 5 years.
Sure.
Some things could have a very big impact. Another thing that we've talked about internally is the city has historically not done a lot of, not made investments that have a high cost now, but have a return on that in the future. And this is an opportunity for us to actually see those play out. Can we afford it? What year makes the most sense for us to make that investment and then see the return on that investment in future years? So it will allow that as well. So absolutely, one of the things we wanted you to see was, before we started into the conversations over the next month and a half, that we have the capability to run these numbers, and just tell us what you want us to run, and at the end we can tell you what the model spits out when we are in our ad-delete sessions. We can say, this is, of the conversations we've had, of the things you want us to model, of the proposed budget as it is right now, this is where we will be in 5 years. We can do those sorts of things.
So Mr. Mayor, so Nelsie or Rashad, tell us what your conversations have been like with the schools.
We haven't, we have not talked to the schools about this issue of any subsidy.
Do we plan to?
We certainly, when you adopt a 5-year plan, and we have the ability to model this, as Nelsie indicated, in the CIP and operating, I mean, we would use this as a basis of discussion for why we're making certain recommendations and what the impact of some of their asks are to us. For what they want, what they want on the operating side or capital side, will absolutely be able to do that.
Well, why I asked that question was because what you said earlier about bringing the capital budget into actually into the discussion, and it's not this thing sort of hanging out here, which everyone thinks it is.
You're absolutely right.
And they're, well,
and one of the things I wanted to add was, we need to have this, we have this long range group that meets to talk about where we're going to be on enrollment. This model is the tool that we have to say, if we build a school in this year, 2 years later, expect this to be the request from the school system on the operating side for instructional staff, for what have you. We don't have that tool right now, and so this would be that.
Because this kind of model, in my view, let's take Jeff Houston for instance. If we had this model in place, or even part of this model in place, given the choices that were available at the time, Jeff Houston versus say something in the west, end of the city, etc., and what it meant to the overall picture for them in terms of rehabilitation of schools, new construction of schools, I think this would really, really help.
Absolutely.
Particularly in that
And Paul raises a very good point in terms of looking at dialogue with the administration, schools and up. But I think this is something when we have a joint work session on March 19th. We can talk about
size. We got this. I think we need to be very proactive with this with them. I really do, because they're going to be taking the lion's share of our capital. I mean, we've got to engage with them on this level.
Absolutely.
I think.
Absolutely. So just I'm going to transition over to Eric, but what I want you all to get from this is, we just wanted to get your initial reaction to some of the dashboards. We've got a few slides that are coming that show you. I'll just give you a sneak peek of these sorts of slides. If this is the right sort of information that helps you understand the impact of the decision-making process, are these the right dashboards? So Eric is going to take you through what we've come up with And it's really from the perspective of how decisions that we make today impact the real estate tax rate. So we really focus on the real estate side of the fence. So please, Eric, go ahead and take over.
All right. Before we start looking at some of the charts, I'll talk about some of the assumptions that went into the model and what we were trying to do. The base revenue assumptions are based on real estate growth, based on the calendar year 15 projections from real estate, and depreciation that tracks historical income growth over the last 10 years, and also historical rates of new construction in the city. Other taxes and revenues are also based on historical rates of growth over the last 4 years, and the period 2010 through 2013 represents the period of slow recovery we've had from the recession. And as has been indicated here earlier, we don't expect the slow rates of growth in our revenues to change anytime soon. And to be conservative, we've also assumed no use of fund balance beyond fiscal year 2015. On the expenditure side, again, we're assuming historical rates of growth between 2010 and 2013, adjusted for slower inflation, which we've seen in the last couple of years. We've got estimates of future growth in key benefit areas for employees, which we factored into the model. The model, for the first time, includes operating budget adjustments that we know are coming in future years, such as a modification to the fleet replacement schedule, the assumption of grant-funded positions such as COPS positions in the general fund, and also one-off expenditures such as the 2016 presidential election are included in the model.
Pardon me, Mr. Mayor, some COPS, I'm sorry, for the freshman, is it?
Community-oriented policing.
That's the federal.
Oh, okay.
The federally funded police positions. At some point when their funding runs out, we assume the full cost of those officers.
I believe for the first year after, is the first year we're required to fund them after federal grant goes live? I always get that from the state grants.
And also, we've included the operating cost impact of capital projects through fiscal year 2019. And if you look in your CIP document at Appendix E, if you want to see the operating impacts of capital projects by project, the information is available there for you. Okay, so what you're going to see is a series of charts that represent the effect of progressively different assumptions on the revenue side, and also some policy decisions on the expenditure side and how they will affect the city's long-term fiscal sustainability. So I'm going to talk about the graph on the left side first, the budget and balance graph. And the vertical axis on the left side just shows the either the surplus or the deficit.
Sorry, Eric,
Go
you were
back.
the first one.
Yeah, I talked about the base model first. And you can see that in fiscal year 15, the city manager proposed a balanced budget, so there's no budget imbalance.
I'm a stickler about that, I'm sorry.
However,
When's his review?
assuming no changes to revenue assumptions and no policy changes, we are running a long-term budget imbalance. So by fiscal year 19, we'd be running a $35 million
It's
budget.
perfect. Again, that's based on a tax rate increase.
Correct.
So basically, it's also based on probably, I mean, obviously you took into consideration of projections, last estimate for real estate assessment, appreciation and everything, based on historical.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's really the slide before, we were just trying to set up what are those bases, what is this, all this narrative is really those base assumptions. And then we're gonna build off of that in the next few slides.
So the 7 years of structural deficit for the foreseeable future, just no.
Still with us.
Yeah.
And this, and look, Eric will get to this, but this assumes no real changes on the expenditure side. It doesn't assume any drastic changes in the way we deliver our services, doing more shared services, that assumption is not there. So this is really, if you take what we're doing today and add our normal cost of doing business over this time period, with the growth that we're anticipating on the revenue side, this is what it looks like into year five.
So in the olden days, last year and beyond, we used to have the forecast scenarios.
That is what this is.
Okay, so there's no, this is no more advanced, if you will, than just taking those amounts.
Yes.
They have a factor
That's
every
exactly
year
right.
that you go up by.
That is what this is. This is really what we've historically done,
Okay,
except
okay.
for, I don't think we were as closely linked on the operating operating cost of capital. So our base model now includes that. So that is in this base model. But really everything else is the same. But the dynamic part is what you're going to see in the ensuing slides. So let's get to those.
So, and can I just ask one question?
Sure.
Just so I understand. So, you know, the employee growth, or benefits costs, obviously is the big driver, large percentage of that assumption. But do you apply the same percentage to that growth for each scenario, and what is the percentage for the medium forecast?
The median expenditure growth over time under the base model is 4.1%. And revenue is expected to grow at 3.3%. So the difference represents that budget imbalance that you see there. In terms of
so maybe that would be a good like little footnote or something to put on here or something. So
but actually, that point that you're making, Paul, is exactly what we want. Excuse me.
well, I know you're trying to get away from.
No,
But
yeah, that would be one of the almost like the policy thing that we would want to add in the plan. That
Okay.
we have this
This
employee
range,
growth.
right.
Yes, exactly.
Because when Tim and I were on feedback, and were you on feedback? I was. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know. We had these scenarios.
You guys were on there.
Scenario. In fact, Bruce I think helped develop it, and there was always this static percentage.
Yeah.
Mark wasn't it? I mean, a certain percentage.
Yeah,
Have a structural deficit.
That's right. They didn't have a structural deficit.
Okay, Eric.
That's right. Revenue growth as far as the eye can see.
well, the other way we're trying to look at things a little bit differently, or at least give you a little more information, is the chart on the right side there. And what that shows is the average real estate tax per homeowner necessary to sustain existing policies, assuming no policy changes. And when Nelsie was talking about presenting the information in terms of real estate tax, that's what that chart does. You see in fiscal year 15, we know that the average home value is around $490,000, and we know the average tax rate is between $1.03 and $1.04 per $100 of assessed value, and that gives you an average tax rate of between $5,000 and $5,100. Well, over time, that's going to go up under current policies.
And so this is assuming to get to a balanced budget in year 5, we would take the burden on the real estate tax side to make the budget balanced. That's where this is just for illustrative purposes, so we can kind of gauge that. But if we did nothing, policies stay the same, that in year 5, if we just change the tax rate to make a balanced budget, that's what you get. That's where the tax burden would be.
So that's the one you're moving.
But that
you wouldn't move any other rate, everything else.
That's exactly right. So
yeah,
that's
but moving all those other rates really, I mean,
and this is
it's
just
really the residential, and that's
It's
the
around the
point,
edges,
and that's
yeah.
why
It's around the edges. That's right.
So this
brings
is,
focus to that.
If we can actually go to the next one, I think you'll start to.
Hold on. Well, maybe the next one gets different. So the chart on the left, I mean on the right, helps to correct the chart on the left.
It's how you would balance.
How would you guess?
If nothing changed.
You're right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah, so that's
Yep,
what
that's
we
exactly right.
understand. It's not just a chart that says. But
Yeah, they talk to each
solve
other.
the chart on the left, then the chart on the right, you have to.
If no other thing changed.
Yeah. So we're going to go to the next one just so you can see how we're trying. This will be like a dashboard, and this is how decisions as they get made would change these lines.
And this is sort of the layering effect that Nelsie was talking about earlier, where you can see the original assumption in the bottom line there. And in this case, we've included the impact of development in the city over the next 5 years that is currently projected on real estate assessments and thus on the real estate tax. So you can see that it pushes the imbalance, reduces it by about $7 million, and also reduces the average tax assessment needed to sustain current policies by around $100. And this incorporates Beauregard and a lot of the other areas where development's going on around the city.
This is net of service tax though, right? This is everything?
Yes. And the next slide shows the development project's impact on other taxes, which include things like sales tax, transient lodging, meals tax, and so on. An example of that would be the hotel rooms that the National Science Foundation is expected to generate, 90,000 hotel rooms after 2017.
Hotel room nights.
Hotel room nights.
I'll take the 90,000 hotel rooms. Not where we build them.
Yes, if we were to get 90,000 hotel rooms,
our problem is solved.
All of the Eisenhower Metro Park.
So again, this moves the line up by another $4 million and reduces the budget imbalance, and it also reduces the tax rate necessary to sustain existing policies by another $53 or so.
Well, and it's also like, you know, it really is in decreasing that overall tax burden on households. It's like you get a C, and then to get back to A minus and A again, it's, you know, yeah.
Right, and it shows the impact of development on the fact that it reduces the tax bills.
Well, and this is actually, I think this is data that we need to demonstrate to the public. I mean, this is, you know, I don't know about all my colleagues, but I'm sure we're getting all the same emails. But you know, as I'm getting emails and getting them back and forth with people about different cuts that are on the table this year, you know, the first thing they hear is, well, there's all this development occurring. I don't understand. Why are we cutting? Why are we looking at a revenue when all this development is occurring? And the answer is not a satisfying one, which is, well, it would be worse. You know, which is the answer. But this is, I mean, that kind of territory between these curves are what demonstrates that. But anyway.
Well, it's just the old tax code too. It highlights the antiquated tax code we have in the state.
And earlier, I think Councilmember Wilson was talking about how important real estate is to the city. And you can see in this case we've modeled a 1% average increase in appreciation over the next 5 years. And you can see that it shifts the curve dramatically.
This is over, Eric. Can you tell me what's over? It's over what's already in the base.
Yeah, the current assumption is that real estate is going to appreciate at the same level as income growth, around 2.3%. This pushes appreciation up to 3.3%. And again, if we get more appreciation, the budget imbalance problem goes away.
Well, so let's talk about that. So the medium growth scenario right now assumes it mirrors income growth.
That's correct.
That, tell me if this is wrong, but in the last 5 years, that's not been the case, right? Is real estate gone above income growth?
It has gone above income growth.
So.
And in the 90s and the early aughts, it was way.
It was way. And okay, so that's our medium growth scenario. In a high growth scenario, are we how far above?
A high growth scenario takes us to balance in fiscal year.
Well, no, but I mean, how far above is our assumption? How far above income growth is our assumption around real estate valuation growth?
The high scenario assumes, I believe, about 1.1% more than the medium scenario. Okay. So it's similar to what you're seeing here.
Okay. And then come back to that. Okay.
And we can come back. I mean, this was really just a.
No, I know you're just showing.
Yeah.
You're showing
how it works.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting.
I'm just gonna pick it apart right now.
We're not suggesting this is what our forecast.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, high is 4.3% over time, as opposed to the 3.3% is what's included in the high. Okay, so we can also model the expenditure side, and this is how we do that. Again, this is for demonstrative purposes only. And just to show you what the model can do. Because in this case, we've removed general fund stormwater debt service and cash capital spending from the equation. Yeah, and again, it pushes the It pushes the line up by another 4.6 million, almost gets the budget into balance. But the point is, you can see between the two lines the effect of this policy change. And in the chart on the right side, you can also see the effect of the policy change on the average real estate amount of real estate tax. It reduces it by $60. And finally, in this case, we remove the operating budget impact of all CIP projects. And again, you can see that the line shifts up dramatically so that it brings us into balance.
And so this would largely, what this would suggest is not that we wouldn't do CIP projects, it would be the expansion. So any CIP projects that expand our service delivery.
We just build schools but not put teachers in them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No problem.
Parks and lock them up. Yeah, build parks and lock them up. No problem.
So with each change
Fire
in
stations and no
either
firefighters.
either revenue assumptions or expenditure policy changes, you can see the effect on the long-term budget imbalance and also the effect on the total taxes that would be paid by the average household in terms of real estate. And this is yet another way of looking at the effect of policy changes. This is the impact of decisions on the average real estate tax bill. The first slide shows no impact, because we haven't made any decisions yet. In the second slide here, you see we bring back the stormwater debt service and cash capital spending scenario, and by fiscal year 19, it would reduce the average real estate tax bill by around $60.53. And if we go back to the scenario we looked at before, where we remove the operating budget impact of all capital projects, reduces the tax bill by $186. Now, the point is not that this is going to happen, but that we can take specific policy decisions, whether they're new funding for capital projects or operating changes, and we can show them in terms of not only the budget imbalance, but also in terms of the tax rate and the amount of real estate tax that would be paid by the average homeowner.
This is just for illustrative purposes. This is what we're trying to get at, Councilwoman Pepper, is that if you tell us something that you would like us to model, we can do it. And then we can show you, if everything else remains the same, how that could impact an average citizen's tax bill. And so that's really what this is trying to get at. And the second one, the eliminate stormwater debt service and cash capital spending, that's not saying we wouldn't invest in stormwater. What it's saying is there's a different, Rich and I have talked about this, he knows. It's saying, is there another way to do this? Meaning, can we get it off of the general fund and do something else, whether it's a utility or that sort of thing? But that would be a policy question that we'd show you in the model its impact, and then you would decide whether or not you were interested in moving towards that. If you're not, then we put it off the table and we continue on down the road.
It's better when you explain it that way, because, wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard to, this is the real world, and what you're suggesting is kind of, if we do this or that.
Yeah,
But if there are ways of diverting this to a utility or whatever, then that's part of the real world too.
And that's actually
Not hypothetical.
right, and that's what, that is what our financial plan is gonna give you, is we're going to, at the end of this, when you all approve the budget, we're gonna use that as the base year. We're gonna model that out, and then we're gonna show you some things that we know are gonna happen or think are gonna happen. The schools impacts, the future development impacts, and then some key policy decisions or areas that we need your help with so that we can work towards that over the ensuing years to solve the budgetary imbalance that we will inevitably have over the next 5 years.
So let me ask a question. So when you guys come into, like when you bring a docket item to us, let's just say, I'm going to use, because I think it's a great example, the Safer Grant one, right? And so you would give us a docket item and you'd say, hey, we want to accept the Safer Grant, and it's going to give us this, and normally we always have the little fiscal impact section, and we'll say, okay,
in FY15, this is going to cost us X dollars. So are we now going to be able to, because this is what I'm hoping we were getting to, when you bring us a docket item, you'll be able to say in that fiscal impact, you'll be able to say, okay, 15, it has this impact, next 5 years, it's going to have this impact on your curve. Show us actually show us essentially a chart that spells out what the impact of this is going to be over the next period of time. I mean, it seems like, obviously not for everything we do, but for something like, say, or development project or something, it would seem like this would be the benefit of this, so that we know that when we make this decision, yeah, it's great in 15, but 16, 17, 18, it's it's not so great, or at least we're cognizant of what we would need to do to accept it.
Yes, we will get there, but especially for you, Justin. Yes, with the caveat, we will get there, but it will not be
next month,
October 1st or next month. We've got to build this model, get familiar with how we use it and what things we can, what decisions we can accurately sort of do the model for. But yes, that's our goal, is to get to that kind of analysis.
Because I mean, I think this kind of builds on what you and particularly on the development side, you and Rob for years were talking about fiscal impact and return on investment as it relates to development. It seems like this is kind of the next step of that for development, but then not just development. It's also just kind of some of the day-to-day decisions we make that have impacts on the stuff.
We're getting back to Nelsie's one of her original points. What do we are changing that whole discussion of how much it's going to cost to what the investment is and how it's going to. I mean, that's a very different approach.
I mean, I think the other one I just kind of thought of that was another one similar to this is, Tim and I remember when we did the, we're not talking about the current retiree, but when we did the retiree life insurance for new employees, we stopped that back in 2009. Was it 2009? I think we did it. That was one of those things where we had a positive impact that first year, but every year because the OPEB liability grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, and that was again where being able to see that number. Yeah, okay, it saves you $20,000 this year, but it saves you X amount over a longer period of time. I think it's important to see that stuff.
Going back to Dell's concern about the modeling, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what this also allows us to do, being the model, the system having flexibility, it's sort of, we can pick and choose. You can scale it. I mean, you can say, we're going to do the sewers or whatever you call it, but we may not do 100% of this, but so we go 50% of it. And what is that? What's the impact at 50%? That's exactly right.
Absolutely. Okay.
We're going to make a staff transition here and have the human resources.
Wait, what?
And we're going to take a restroom break.
You kind of make a council transition.
Tag team.
We are.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Here's that way.
I like it.
The mayor decided to take a restroom break.
Second team's coming in this. Off the bench. Do a 6-man, right?
Can we model residents that have a last name that begins with M?
What type of modeling are you looking for?
Well, you're overpopulated perhaps, and you're looking to make some adjustments.
I'm not doing anything. This is I tried to get them to kill that article.
I'm kidding.
The youngest thing in the world. We get one email from a resident, and so I asked Jessica to look into it. And then I guess the resident called the paper. I guess a couple of residents called. So the paper called me and she's like, "Yeah, you're working on the cat license."
You should see this guy's email.
I was like, I'm not. I said I asked the animal control to assess it and come back with a recommendation. I have 2 licensed cats.
Another case of a stellar career.
I did get someone emailed me warning me that just, you don't want to screw this up.
Cat license.
Both my cats are licensed. I want you to know. I know the greatest was over. This is another one that's going to get a ton of approach attention. I know. The amount of practice is inversely proportional to the importance of the matter. Oh gosh, I'm sure he'll dig that up. Yeah, he'll love that. I love anything involving animals.
I'll go pick up on the Royal Street bus thing too. Doesn't he live on the where does he live?
He lives on Royal. Yeah.
He lives on Royal. Yeah.
They live in they rent.
Are you talking about the income cap thing?
Because remember last year, the key thing is translating that into resources that can be used for maintenance. That's not necessarily the case. You have to make sure that 500 is somehow associated with that. So it can't be, otherwise they go.
Well, and I think they also need to do something that they can spend.
Because then all of a sudden, when they hit the 500, no longer. That's tax increase on their wages. Those seniors. They want that. So that's why that 500,000.
Oh, it's a big side line. I don't mind it.
Does the work.
Is that even online?
It's on microbeats.
Yeah, I'm going to
Whoever does just the floppy
This is what we gotta do. We just like each other. Yeah, that's great. It's good company. That's good.
Well, Bruce started.
There's a cap, but yeah, thank you.
Not quite there, because I used it to show that there's something gap. It's actually to your point, in there.
Oh, that's the issue. Yeah. I mean, that's overall the issue. It's a structural imbalance.
Appreciating others.
And then you go into the same about because that was even when
You have a lovely building. So we had a really nice fire station. I went through all that.
flattening out, but and you know, feedback I think talked about that last year, right? I mean, the percentage of taxation is a percentage of calls. Can't pay it.
Or I didn't have a chance to do this the last meeting.
I appreciate that.
I mean, the feds have seen, I mean, Alex is going to go 1% this year, maybe. That was the first one that got in what, 3 years or something? The feds aren't getting raises.
We're modeling. Hey guys, aren't we modeling? Tom, the model can residents have a lot of beginning with M. Because there are just too many. And, you know, we've got to start driving them.
Are we exporting?
Yeah, and then.
Oh, I was thinking differently about model. Oh, I thought.
And the special.
I thought you were going to try on a nice.
You know, because of the extra typesetting of the computers and the M correctly, that costs what? Millions to do that.
You're a appreciate when you're young, do you?
W's are upside down M's though, so they're.
Oh yeah, that's another one.
I'll model anything you want. What do you want me to model?
You're good.
What do you want me to model?
We're good with that.
You want to make money for this.
Oh. That's a council count.
Okay, ready.
All right.
Sorry.
Good afternoon, Mayor Ewell and members of City Council. Today I will be presenting on the subject of total compensation. In this year's proposed budget, you will see the continuation of a number of initiatives. We continue investments to address pay and benefits challenges. We continue to improve our position in the market, and we continue to strengthen our ability to attract and retain top talent. Our initiatives are based in our compensation philosophy, which are in alignment against our strategic plan, core guiding principles, and the city manager's performance plan. This slide represents the pillars of total compensation, which include compensation philosophy, market alignment, opportunities and development, employee performance, benefits and wellness, and the strategic plan, the guiding principles, and the city manager's performance plan. The city's compensation philosophy was adopted by City Council back in 2010, and we thank you for that. And it is the foundation for compensation analysis and decision making. We strive to be competitive with the market average. We are data-driven and use market studies to determine competitiveness, and we have developed a plan to achieve market alignment. Our compensation plan is then aligned with goals and visions outlined in the strategic plan, core guiding principles, and the city manager's performance plan.
Can I just ask a quick question, please?
Yes.
The market studies to determine competitiveness, you know, we always use the, do you still use the same group of jurisdictions, or is it just?
The 5 jurisdictions.
Okay, and that's across the board for everything?
For everything, as long as
because there were times where we had a core 5, but then if, you know, this group, you know, they, oh, well, we gotta compare ourselves to this group and we'll knock this group out, and it's the same 5.
It's a very comprehensive and consistent approach.
What are the 5 again?
Arlington, Fairfax, Prince William, Prince George's, and Montgomery County.
And we are okay with Prince George's and Montgomery, even though they may have different kinds of structures.
And we know the differences, and you'll
okay.
see through the presentations where there are areas where we cannot compare data because it doesn't exist. So,
and the way the legislature deals with their localities and certain things like that, I mean, it's a whole different.
It is, but also the thing to consider is what is our competitive pool for. So we are.
I mean, I understand why they're there. I just, how do we account for
change
some real
differences in size, structure, et cetera.
and we do, and it's built into our model.
Okay.
All right. Determining our market alignment requires good job analysis. The studies are very complex and require comprehensive solutions, so that can address the question that you just posed. In the past, we had a very limited focus and only benchmark our pay scale, which is look at annual salary, pay scale to pay scale. In more recent years, total compensation staff working with the public safety work groups and now the newly created employee benefits and advisory group have started to use a larger variety of analytical tools. We still need to ensure our pay scales are aligned with the market. We also review our pay policies to determine if the pay for performance increases we provide are competitive with other jurisdictions. So we're not just looking at one thing. Meanwhile, in public safety, we analyze cumulative earnings because of the highly structural and unique types of jobs. We have been very successful at individual job analysis to address very specific market alignment issues.
Another quick question for information. This newly created committee, who selected the members of that committee?
They were nominated throughout the city by different members of management, labor groups. So it was a collaborated effort, and they're very diverse and representative of all sectors.
And ultimately, I approved the final selection.
And are there younger employees on that as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a really good cross-mix of ranks, in terms of public safety, ranks, types of jobs, years of service, and then the newly formed general schedule one, it'll be the same sort of diverse makeup.
All right. The table shows market data for various levels in the organization and indicates where we're on target or need improvement. As you can see, the red represents when we're not looking really good, and the bigger the red, the more alignment that there needs to occur. There is work to be done, but the good news is some of the policies and budget initiatives we recently adopted are improving our market position. And I guess I have to thank you for that again.
So is this just pay here that I'm looking at? So this is not overall value of compensation, benefits, everything else. This is solely pay.
Yes, not total compensation. There's work to be done, but again, we're on the right path. As you can see, we're very behind the market at the executive level, and that's why we, in fiscal year 2014, we've begun the work of developing executive pay bands, and they will be implemented for fiscal year 2015. And we need to consider increasing the ranges of those bands. Where you see under management, it's supposed to be unknown, not uncomb, but sorry about that. No data is available for management level jobs because most of our competitors have already moved those groups into pay bands. So unless we go individual and by individual and try to identify a specific position to another in a jurisdiction, we're not able to find that data.
And who do you define as an executive level?
Like deputy directors, assistant directors, all the way to division chiefs.
No, that's
management. You're talking about
department
department
heads.
Department heads and above. So those are deputy city managers and department heads are executive. And that's what you approved moving to pay bands last year.
And we have a lot of experience with salary pay compression, and starting from the top is the way to go to alleviate any possible compression from reoccurring. Most of the remaining jobs on the general schedule are aligned or ahead of the market. And why is this? Because we aligned the pay scale in fiscal year 2013 by 7%. The VRS 1 pay increases are moving the scale forward. We have enhanced our promotional pay policies to compete with the competitors, and we continue to fund career ladder elevations. And I want to make sure that, to point this out, that continuing to fund career ladder elevations will help us move up the actual average salaries, especially in professional jobs. Nearly all of our initiatives in recent years tie directly to pay for performance. Pay bands equates to performance plans and variable pay, giving the city manager the flexibility to reward high performance. Career ladders also equates to performance-based mobility. Employees gain new skills, and then they're ready to move upward and to promote. And pay policies have been revised so employees who advance and receive greater levels of promotional pay. And we no longer have backward movements on our pay scales.
What are we doing exactly for pay for performance?
The executive level, since we established the executive pay bands, we now have a system where we look at job descriptions and standards of performance that are aligned with the strategic plan, the guiding principles, and the city manager's performance plan, and we can hold the accountability where it needs to be. So if there is 6 areas where they're identified, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. At the end of the year, the manager can make the assessment as to whether or not to reward the employee according to the performance. So right now we have a very automatic system. Everybody gets this evaluation, very subjective. No real way to holding the accountability where it needs to be. So we're moving away from an automatic process to one that really rewards high performance.
This might be a little radical, but have there ever been any discussions about giving each department, say, an allotment, and giving the director or the assistant city manager the ability to determine? I mean, and then, here's the way I'm, instead of across the board, 5% bonus. This person has the ability to decide, well, hey, John and Sue are really great, they get 5%, but in reality, Jane and Joe have been sort of mediocre this year, and they're only going to get 2.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, it's a little more private sector-ish, but I mean, it's sort of, I mean, how do you achieve some of these goals without sort of moving in that direction?
So I've been in organizations, I've only worked in public organizations that do exactly that, and we are going, that's the model that we're going to do for the executives. So there will be a variable pay system, and there will be a bucket, if you will, and we'll make decisions on pay amongst the executive staff. You better plug in the computer's going to go out. The executive staff to make that variable pay allocation exactly like you described. In this slide here, it says senior management pay bands proposed. That's would be the next step, is to establish a pay band for senior managers and then do the very same thing. The difficulty with doing it all at once or in one fell swoop is that our pay structure is still on grade and step, and so you can't do a variable pay allocation on a grade and step system because it is not built that way. And so what we've said to the organization, what I've said is, we'll look at how we apply pay for performance based upon these elements of our organization. What we do for senior managers and executives may be different than what we do in public safety. We may not move away from grade and step in public safety, although I have been in organizations that have done that too.
Yeah.
We'll have to decide if that's the appropriate structure in public safety and Juno's schedule. I believe, and we've already made the decision, that a variable pay system and pay bands is appropriate for executives and senior management, and so we're doing that. So this year, in fiscal year 15, will be the first time that executives will, their compensation will be decided under this way, and we'll create the pay bands for senior management in July of 15, and then in 16, apply the pay the same way. And so we've got a very sort of structured and thoughtful way we're rolling it out.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think we have to sort of move in that direction, for sure.
And to Paul's point, I want to say maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, Fairfax County government looked at that same issue when they first rolled it out. I think they did move away from it.
They moved away from it because, like Rashad said, they just overnight. I think didn't they just overnight just sort of put it into place?
Everybody was rated excellent.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, you know. So yeah, and they admit, you know, that they didn't execute as well.
And the other piece is, when we talk about pay for performance, and I'm sure I'll talk about this extensively next week at the employee town hall meeting, the implementation of pay performance comes in very different ways. It could be pay bands and variable pay, which we're doing with the executives. It also is career ladders, and so that is an element of pay for performance, where you have a structured set of skills and technical competencies that you have to demonstrate and achieve before you're able to be elevated to a higher pay. And so we are implementing a pay for performance system in this organization already, and it looks differently depending on what category of employee you are vis-a-vis this slide.
Yeah, because I don't know how we don't implement elements of a pay for performance system and retain the people you say you want to retain, and you're paying for these skills, and you know, we just have to have
the change in our
elements of that
promotional
as part
policy
of
is
it.
another
Absolutely.
example of that.
And they should be rewarded for better performance over others.
We weren't competitive.
Absolutely.
So people could leave and do better, or come in new and do better than we would treat existing employees that got promoted. And so we changed that, and we don't do it the way we used to, and we're very competitive now in how we can offer promotional pay for people that elevate, that are within our organization.
This slide illustrates the multi-year implementation of the executive and management bands. The implementation includes 3 parts, which are the 3 bit circles represented in the graph. The first step is creating the pay bands, then developing the individual employee performance plans and the standards of performance, and the third step is implementing variable pay. So we started developing the executive pay band back in fiscal year 2014. Its full implementation is expected in fiscal year 2015. At the same time, we will begin to create management bands the next level down, which is the deputies, division chiefs, etc., in fiscal year 2015 with full implementation by 2016. Really want to emphasize that the Human Resources Department continues to work collaboratively with the 3 public safety work groups to jointly identify and analyze market alignment issues using the funds approved by City Council. What have we done? We aligned the fire department entry pay to the market in fiscal year 2014 by investing $750,000. We are analyzing police and sheriff entry pay. We used $400,000 in fiscal year 2013 to fix pay compression issues caused by leapfrogging. And we amended pay policies to eliminate backward movement on the pay scale. We also eliminated waiting periods for career ladder elevations with $500,000 in fiscal year 2013. So employees are elevated when they become eligible. And we're continuing to develop an expanded fire career ladder program for this fiscal year.
As I recall, that alignment is a tough one in prior years because they had a hard time comparing our firefighters, our police officers to other jurisdictions.
And that's why we're not only looking at annual salaries, we're looking at cumulative earnings, and that's where you see the big difference.
Is some of those difficult to figure out what exactly the comparability is, or how?
And we're using many factors. I mean, I think I'm going through that in this slide.
So, and again, just for a point of reference, so this is solely pay, right? Because there were other things we did as well with public safety and fire in terms of the work Laura and her team have done on, you know, the pension and all that other. So this is just pay.
Just pay.
Right. It's just pay.
Yes. That is the pay. So do you feel that we either solved it or that we're well on the way to solving it? Because that's not what I'm hearing. It was the beginning of a long-term commitment. So, I mean, it fixed the leapfrogging from being, you know, a problem with promotion of pay. But in terms of compression, it still exists and it requires a lot of money.
But we've come a long way, though.
We've come a long way.
I mean, let's not forget. You know, I mean, there are some people that are never going to be satisfied, but you know, we have come a long way.
And we have shown the commitment that
Absolutely.
everything else that we're doing is really making a difference.
And frankly, the things that we worked on and started on are the things that employee group asked us to do.
Exactly.
You know, they prioritized and said, what's the most important place to start? That's where we started. Leapfrogging, career ladders. Those are the things that we did based upon their request and prioritization.
So I mentioned earlier that public safety jobs are highly structured and unique. Because of this, the Human Resources Department, along with our partners in public safety work groups, have created a cumulative earnings model to benchmark public safety jobs. This model allows us to compare career earnings by analyzing the interaction of pay structures, pay practices, and pay delivery systems. We're no longer taking the snapshot in time approach. Instead, we're able to provide a year-by-year comparison. And by doing this, it allows us to make comprehensive adjustments, and therefore we avoid the quick fix mentality that brought us so many problems in the past. The model is very comprehensive and takes into account the following factors: annual salary, number of possible elevations and promotions, pay policy for elevations and promotions, time within grade requirements, hours worked, and structure over time. This is my favorite.
So who's running, who chairs this cumulative model program? Or is that you?
Who shares it?
No.
Who's
Who's chairing that? Yeah.
It's the HR department and the public safety work groups together.
And the staff people, particularly Ryan.
Bill Mitchell, Ryan, and Art Wicks, and Donna Warren. So this slide is an example of an output input from the cumulative earnings model. Just like our partners in budget with a 5-year forecasting model, we have a 30-year.
I know. We so underpaid.
What do they know?
HR has their own fancy analytics.
It shows the career progression of a non-supervisory police officer, and we can run this model for every position in public safety. We're just using it now for non-supervisory police officers. This is actually the data we just recently used to respond to one of your requests that came through called Pre-Connect, so it was very timely. The model shows an employee's progression from entry-level officer to a full performance officer. The timeline is based on the requirements contained in our job specifications. The slide compares Alexandria's annual salary and cumulative earnings to our competitors. Comparative data was gathered again by total compensation and the public safety work groups. Here we see that Alexandria officers are behind in annual salary for the first 10 years of their career. After the 10-year mark, we move ahead of the market due to the career ladder program elevations. And because our annual salaries are behind for so long, basically for 10 years, our cumulative earnings are also behind for 15 years. Officers, however, move ahead in annual salary and cumulative earnings at around the halfway mark in their career, so at year 15. At 30 years, we're slightly above the market in cumulative earnings. And again, we can run models for all the public safety ranks to compare salaries and earnings to our competitors.
So in many ways, I mean, this demonstrates kind of what we've always heard, but never saw in this kind of graph. And I guess the challenge for us is that we lose a lot of those officers in that period of time at the beginning,
10 years
during
is
those
a
first
long
10 years
time.
when they leave, and we've now funded their training and they've gone to another jurisdiction. And so we essentially have to make the argument, hey, you gotta hang on, hang on for 15 years and we'll make it up to you.
But at the can I just ask, but really is it at the 6-year mark that, I mean, is it close? I mean, is it? I mean, what are we talking about here? Like $500?
Hundreds of dollars of that.
Just 100, yeah. So it's sort of parity, but not really. I mean,
it's just you're catching up because you have it's very compounded. And we're developing other models to address, how do we close the gap? And we also understand that if we were to address entry pay as an isolated fix, the compression, then
That's right.
it would take us.
It's a push-pull.
Yeah, the other point I was just making is that while we spend a lot of time sort of understanding the conditions, we still have to understand the impact of that condition. We all think that it has an impact on retention of employees, but we really need to assess that and get the analytics around that as well. So that's the next piece of that equation.
Yes. Using the cumulative earnings model, we have determined that we're misaligned in some areas and improving in others due to the recent initiatives. The table shows our market position for non-supervisory positions. The table contains entry pay and cumulative earnings comparisons. We see here that firefighters and medics are ahead of the market at entry because of pay adjustments that we enacted this year. So for the first time, we're looking good there. Cumulative, though, firefighters remain behind the market, but we're working to address this with the expanded career ladder program that we have in place for the department. We know that police entry pay is behind the market, but cumulatively, we are ahead. We must be careful when considering adjustments at entry pay, as mentioned, because of the impact to pay compression and cumulative earnings. A comprehensive approach is recommended in this case.
can I ask you,
Yes.
sorry, to keep asking these questions, but
Yes, go ahead.
why I ask you the question about the makeup of the committee, and particularly, not only the but the public safety work group as well, is we want to make sure we have a real mix of folks at the table, and not just the folks who are, say, more advanced in their career.
Yeah, we have members of their labor groups, and they're very young. We have members of management at the department level. We have Ryan and Bill and Art from our office. But yes, that's one of the priorities.
I think it's probably a good blend because, for example, one of the recommendations, one of the next recommendations after we did leapfrogging and career ladders is starting pay. So, they are recognizing that starting pay, as we do at the analysis shows, is an issue. But how we deal with that is quite complicated because you up starting pay and then you create compression all the way up. And that becomes a 7-digit number to correct all of that at once. A big 7-digit number to correct it all at once.
Well, and I think we found with the work on the pension committee and all the issues that you were dealing with there, having that mix of folks is also really good for communication out to the departments and everything, and really getting a level, base of understanding of what's at stake and what we're trying to achieve.
And that's why we've made a lot of progress this year. Going to deputy sheriff, entry pay remains behind the market. That the 1% pay increases related to the DRS have actually helped to improve deputy sheriff's positions, and we will continue those 1% increases for 3 more years. I believe that goes up to 2017. As previously noted, we have data for supervisory public safety positions, and our data and analysis indicates that we have problems at same ranks in certain departments, so they're mixed results. So if you're a lieutenant versus a captain, the data varies. Addressing our pay challenges is important at all levels. We will continue to work with the public safety work groups and use our data-driven techniques to develop comprehensive solutions. And now we're in opportunities and development. We really believe that career ladders are an excellent vehicle for our pay-for-performance initiatives and the fulfillment of our compensation philosophy. They provide upward mobility to employees who have attained the necessary skills and capabilities for promotion. It's worth it to mention the significant citywide investments that have been made since fiscal year 2013. 500,000 was invested, and that was for all agencies. In fiscal year 2014, it was $900,000 for general scale and fire. And in fiscal year 2015, which we're proposing this year, is $700,000, and that's for citywide. Also, 207 employees have been elevated since fiscal year 2013, and we're projecting 41 career ladders and 25 departments to be in place by fiscal year 2016. We know that professional development and training opportunities provide many benefits to the city. Employees are able to promote through the career ladders, and it also enhances the city's services provided to our citizens. We're proposing a new consolidated professional development and training fund, which will help us better align training development initiatives to meet the growing demands of our workforce. $40,000 in new funding proposed in fiscal year 15 to increase the total investment to $300,000. This funds again consolidate citywide training and tuition assistance programs.
Can I step back for a second?
I'm sorry.
I want to step back to career ladders for a second. So, can we get? You don't have to do it now or later. Just maybe just something you can send us. Can you flesh this out a little bit more and just show us what we're kind of some examples of what we're actually doing? I mean, we're putting a lot of money into this, and I support it. But it would be useful, I think, for the public and for all of us to just kind of show us kind of overall what we're doing and what the type of investments we're making are. So if something you could just, and again, you don't have to, nothing too big, but just something that we could look at and break down how we're spending the money.
And Tom knows this because every time I have a meeting with him, I show him our latest analysis on our career ladders, and very exciting work that is being produced. So, yes.
And Mr. Mayor, and just one quick question. So the professional development and training, great. Is it just for general service folks, or is it executive? Everyone on down. And are there certain areas we're focusing in on, or is it for
Well,
anything? I mean,
Up until
Just out
now,
of
we had
curiosity.
3 different funds. We had tuition reimbursement, we had $180,000, and basically employees come forward, they get up to $1,500 a year for whatever education they require. Then we had the professional development fund, that at one point was $250,000 that we have been using, and that's been kind of where we see the greatest growth, because this is targeted training for skills that are necessary at the moment. And then we also had our training a la carte, where we have this training catalog and we contract vendors and people sign up for classes. So what we're saying is we're gonna put one big umbrella for the $300,000, and we're gonna be able to use it more for the professional growth of our employees.
But in terms of the content, Paul, to sort of where we focus on, it really is tied to that, because we have so many different jobs and different kinds of success in the organization.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. That's why I'm asking. Yeah.
So it's tied to the relevance of the growth opportunity for the individual and what they can bring back to the organization at evaluations made by the department level and by human resources. So if employee A wants to go to a training to get an additional certification in real estate assessing, for example, then that should be their job as to be an assessor. They should be doing that work. It should be approved by the department head, it goes to HR, it's reviewed and approved by them. And so if there's a mismatch there, why are we investing resources to go to this conference, to this training, don't see the relevance?
Well, that's what
we have an opportunity at 2 places to make that check, at the department level and at HR. And I know for a fact HR has asked questions to say, show me the alignment here. Let's just make sure this is a right investment and a good investment.
Yeah, I'm not against it. I would encourage it,
but we want to make sure it's value added.
Yeah, and someone in Emily's group or planning is very different from, say, something Ryan might be interested in.
Exactly.
And
we don't allow Ryan to do anything.
I got it all.
We're gonna take
He's witty.
Humility is one of our guys. 40 now.
I know your professional development training program, this is what's in the budget. Where are we in terms of the Frank Mann funds? How are they being used?
That's been exhausted.
Yeah, that's been exhausted.
That's been exhausted?
Yeah, that's been exhausted.
They were specific to training program 4 years ago.
There was a trust that former Mayor Mann set up to use for educational and training purposes, and I was getting the bank statements for years as the mayor, and every time I opened the bank statement, I looked at it and saw these, $100,000+ sitting there, and I said, hey, what are we doing with this? And then City Manager Hartman said, well, we're going to start using it as a shared part of the requirement.
What they said was,
His request was that it is shared with schools, and so there's some arrangement with that. But so they've all been expended.
Yeah, we split some of it with the
We said we
schools.
split with the schools, we used some for our leadership and management improvement training program, and I believe we used some of those funds to provide for some graduate education for some new college programs.
That's good.
Ryan's using all of it.
So
Ryan's
that's-
using all of it.
Yeah, I can't do that.
Yeah, all right, good.
Yeah, one last point on this, and I think it also addresses your question, is that we are reorganizing the department and bringing the expertise to help us model this training and development from someone that is an expert and bring that expertise. Okay. So now we move to benefits and wellness. We have done a lot in terms of our health insurance since last fiscal year. We implemented major plan design changes. We're currently working with our brokers to determine impact and collaborating with the Employee Benefits Advisory Group. We're still underway with our annual renewal renegotiations. But this proposed budget assumes a 2.4% increase for health insurance premiums. We are proposing no changes to the health insurance premiums for fiscal year 2015. we're negotiating the reintroduction of the standard Kaiser HMO, which is the one we had before the plan design changes, and because we understand that that's Kaiser's model. So it will be reintroduced this year, effective July 1st, with no deductible.
And how much is that costing? Or would potentially
There's
cost
gonna
us?
be a gap between the DHMO,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is, there has to be, so, and it's about between 14% and 20%, we're still negotiating.
Yeah, but I think didn't you propose, I mean, isn't there a figure associated with that in your budget?
No,
Not yet.
it's built into the 2.4% growth number. That
Oh, okay, I see.
We're looking at
Okay, so
cost.
it's cost, okay,
Yeah.
got it, okay.
So we're also competitively bidding the dental and vision plans to maximize the value and minimize the cost, and to no cost to the city.
So sorry. Go. So the assumption is that you're not going out to bid on healthcare this year.
Right.
Is that a next year activity?
2016, that's the recommendation of our broker, after looking at all the plan design changes that we had last year.
Generally go out every 2 or 3 years anyway.
Yeah, and we really don't have many carriers.
No.
We changed the design.
Okay, that's right, we did.
Well, the coming year, they're all gonna United and all of the big, I mean, they're all gonna be changing their models.
Yeah.
So,
The
like,
ACA
soon.
affects
Yeah.
what we do here, and there really are only a limited number of providers in the area. We have
There are 5 major
and we
ones.
currently have 2 of them.
And you're gonna see
Kaiser
insurance,
will have-
and those insurance companies are gonna be acting, Aetna, United, all them, they're gonna be more like, a Kaiser. They're gonna have their own sort of Kaiser program out there.
So is that gonna be an integrated discussion with the schools?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
we have the
continue
same
the
group.
dialogue, yes.
Right, the same group works.
Yes, and we're trying to bring Dash on board too.
Good luck. Yeah.
And you know, this, we just got the numbers, and the schools, their numbers are really good, so they're really helpful.
And one last question, I sound like a broken record on this, and this, I'm not sure where it's appropriate, but, you know, one thing about wellness is, you know, I'm really a strong believer in the fact that we should have a clinic here. And, I mean,
Give him this, he's asking every year. Give him this, please.
I know, I mean, this, we have got to do something like this. We have too many people not to be doing something like this with healthcare costs going up and trying to manage it.
I was trying to beat you to that question this year, but I knew you were gonna ask that. It's true. Yeah.
That's what we mean in the last bullet, is that that's the first, that's our foray to try to get to on-site wellness clinic, occupational health clinic in our facility somewhere. So we're starting with medical standards, we're bringing the IO on, all of that will help us get to something on site here.
Because I think the one in Arlington is working out really well, isn't it?
There's one in Richmond, Fairfax only has
Fairfax
public
has
safety.
public safety.
Yeah.
They've had it for a while though.
Yeah, and we're partnering with Fairfax to update our medical standards, which is a great thing.
We looked at this year and we realized we really have to have the revised medical standards that have been revised for some time in place before we can move forward with that. So that's the initiative there.
What is revised medical? Yeah, what's that?
Well, the medical standards, it kind of dictates what are the requirements for an employee. You know, if you're a firefighter, you must be able to
so those are
lift
internal
20
to
pounds.
us?
Yes.
Okay. So those are our medical
So ours haven't been updated in 30 years, and a lot has changed, so.
In addition to changes we made to the pension plan, we have to look at all those jobs and make sure they can do the alternative jobs that we have in place. And it doesn't say it requires you to lift 20 pounds to do this alternative job.
Because we want to ensure a measure of wellness through the clinic we would employ.
Wow, so that could take a long time.
Oh, no, we.
No, you're already.
You're already,
yeah.
yeah.
Are you already?
That's
Oh,
what I'm
okay.
Yeah.
Ryan will take care of it.
That's right, Ryan.
He's been trained on
All right.
Takes me a day to ask for a raise.
Yeah. We continue to monitor the impacts of the Affordable Care Act. We know that everything is gonna be effective July 1st, 2016 for us. We're proposing a $50,000 down payment for a new web-based benefits platform that will help us provide the city a robust tool to automate and streamline the eligibility and enrollment process, which is now a requirement of the ACA. We will be able to provide the exchange of enrollment and billing data between the city and the carriers, which now we don't have that, so it's a manual process of matching. And it will allow the city to bring all of its benefit programs under one umbrella, so employees can understand their benefits, their costs, they can enroll, they can manage and change their information.
Can I just step in here? Justin, you had asked a question in your quite lengthy list of budget questions about this.
It's lighter than last year. Come on, give me credit.
Yeah, but there were questions within questions.
Right.
And then he added one at the end as if that wasn't enough.
You know the rule. You can't mock me and then use my revenue. That's the rule. That's the rule. That's the rule. That is the rule. You can mock me all you want, but I don't want to see anything that's on my memos in your annual sheet. See? Tim knows where it's at.
Tim and I want our names on all this.
So, just real quickly, you had asked if there was a way to, I think it was to capitalize some of this, put it in the capital budget on this benefits.
Yeah.
The 50,000, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bettina, this is really for us to explore our options. It would be a software package anyway, so most likely we would fund it out of the operating budget depending on what we choose, but I think it's still, this is more for us to explore the options that we have.
Well, the actual cost is about $150,000. It's not going to have to be in place until July 16th, so it gives us the time with the $50,000 to begin the negotiation and kind of building the structure, so we'll have it in time.
But don't we normally, like, for something like this, wouldn't we normally create, we create a capital project saying, hey, we need a new benefit platform system, and, we might put it over 2 years and say, okay, in the first year we're going to fund the feasibility study and figure out what's out there, and then, the second year we might fund the actual purchase. That's why I was just, it seemed like a type of thing that would fit into a capital project.
We can do that, and really the IT.
Honestly.
Yeah, no, but now that Kevin's on board, I think we're probably going to have a different approach to our IT plan next year than we've had historically.
Okay.
There's a huge gray area in IT between hardware, software, where we fund it. And we need to clarify that so that as we move forward, we understand, is this an operating cost or is it a capital cost? From my perspective, this is an operating cost. It's software. But we need to come up with a better.
Listen, this is what I do, but my day job, we capitalize.
Cash. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we use cash. We capitalize software all the time. As long as you meet a certain level and then we depreciate it and all that. So a software application purchase on its own could be a capital expense, I guess. It could be, and then we would have to look at that. But this is the 50,000 is just to get Bettina and her shop the ability to explore the options and what we need to be in compliance in 2016 with respect to this. But we can look at it for next year when we fund the rest of it.
Okay.
What makes sense?
So do we ever debate the possibility of having, say an outside vendor, do this for us?
Isn't that what this is?
Essentially, I know, but it to really just sort of manage, they customize and put, the City of Alexandria banner on their software or their platform, and in effect, you punch in what you want.
And it's because it's something new, and a lot of the other jurisdictions are really panicking and putting a lot of money on this. I think it's a good thing we have the time to really explore our options. We really also want something that really integrates with all of our systems.
Because we have a system, it's done sort of outside, it's sort of managed, but it's really outside, and you get a card, and you have, it's like a charge card, and you use it, when you go to the doctor or the dentist, or do whatever you do with it, and
we don't always build this in-house necessarily. We'll look, this funding gives us the ability to implement it in the fourth quarter in anticipation of the beginning of this fiscal year 16, and the monies to do the study or the review of just exactly how we should do it, whether it's inside, outside, or.
Yeah, because right now we get a bucket, $20,000 or whatever, and then you decide what it is you want, and then, that's it.
Okay, last slide. This is very exciting because this really shows our strategic focus. The Human Resources Department will be reorganizing under the new administrative regulation on departmental reorganization that was approved by the city manager. This will give us a more strategic focus and less transactional, flatter, less hierarchical, and we will not be adding any more full-time employees. We're
You don't need
refocused. We don't.
Yeah, Ryan.
I have Ryan.
And Steve. Oh, and Steve. Yeah. No,
He counts for one.
Oh, yeah.
And Steve. And he's here.
Ryan's getting stuffed in a locker later this afternoon.
So they refocus positions experts in industrial organizational psychology, investigations, organizational development and training, as I mentioned earlier, recruitment, employee relations, compensation, benefits, enterprise, and human resources information system. So we have come a long way, the commitment is there, and it's very exciting with all the work that we have ahead, and just give us 5 more analysts like Ryan, and we'll be 20 years ahead.
Well, you're finished, right?
Yes.
This is a good segue for the closeout. I mean, first of all, thank you for the presentation and to everybody, city manager and everybody else for the hard work of the past 2 or 3 years or longer trying to bring our HR into the real world, because we have been behind for so long, and that's part and parcel how and why we lost some of our competitors, in addition to the market and the economy and everything else. But the fact is that it's a moving target. We can be as current as we want to be today and get there, but we're in this competitive environment, and so we can get there. We can be there today, but then tomorrow we're going to fall a little bit because somebody else has gotten ahead of us, or somebody else is trying moving this technology. And I'm saying all that because I spent a lot of time at Metro dealing with Metro is probably more current with 14,000 employees than any organization around here. But the mere fact is that these things are changing every hour, minute by minute, day by day, and it takes I'm not suggesting we need more staff, but it takes dedicated professional staff to really be on top of this. And when they're on top of it, guess what? It helps everybody, the whole company.
And we're doing it all in-house too.
Yeah. So it's a yeoman's challenge, but we're getting there. But again, that's what the public has to understand as well.
So our next.
What is this for? Is this just for next time, or?
No. On the revenue slide, I had highlighted the things that we were going to talk about, but that relates to all of the revenue changes that are recommended for Parks and Recreation, and this is consistent with our market rate and cost recovery policy. So if you wanted to spend time in it, you could, but we just wanted you to see what those changes were.
There's also some code fee changes, which isn't part of the general fund, so it wasn't on this list, but we can talk about that more next week when we have the livable, green, and prospering city focus area discussion.
And where are we in general with the fees to the development community in terms of hookups and things like that? Are there still ongoing discussions, or are we in a good? I know we made some changes last year, but I thought we were still talking about stormwater and sewers.
Well, in the case of sewer connection fees, we are probably towards the upper end of last time we made the change.
I know we had somewhat of a summary of that.
Particularly the multifamily.
Yeah.
We made a big change when there was ability to come flow into the CIP sewer projects. Storm, that is, as Steve discussed earlier, that is something we're going to be discussing over the next year or two, because we got a new state permit, we got a lot of new expenses that we're mandated, and we're going to have to figure out whether we use a stormwater utility or whether it's general fund or something. So that's to be determined. In general, our building fees are the late building inspection. They're not the highest in the region, but they are more than covering our expenses. In fact, Wednesday, there will be some fee reductions next year in deployment, particularly about $250,000, where we're basically we're getting we're a lot more efficient in the use of our people than we were before, so that in fact we've taken out a lot more volume without a lot more expenses, and we're able actually to, one particular key category, to actually reduce that. In general, we are probably not the highest in the region, probably by Maryland and Frederick County, but we are higher than Fairfax County and others. I think we're at this point a reasonably comfortable place on almost all of our related bases.
So tomorrow we have our public hearing. It starts at 4 o'clock. Monday. Well, Monday public hearing starts at 4 o'clock. That's the next session we've got. And then we've got Wednesday's work session, which will be at 6:30. Livable, green, and prospering focus.
All right, well, thank you. So everybody Tuesday night for the regular council meeting.
Maybe I can do the host.